The wheelbarrow rattled across the dusty road as Mr. Peter tightened the cloth around his chest, feeling the fragile weight of his twins breathe against his skin while hunger clawed at his stomach. The sun had barely risen, yet the day already demanded everything he had. Hello everyone, welcome to my channel where we share fascinating stories. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends, and leave your thoughts in the comment section. Mr. Peter had not imagined life would collapse so quickly. One week he was a factory assistant with a modest salary and loud dreams, and the next he was standing outside a locked gate, clutching a termination letter that smelled of cheap ink and finality. The company downsized, they said. Nothing personal. The words followed him home like flies, buzzing around his head as he opened the door to a silent house and found Linda sitting on the edge of the bed, their newborn twins between them like a fragile truce. Linda's eyes were already distant. She listened as he explained, nodding without warmth, rocking Mary while Naomi slept. When he finished, silence filled the room. Then she spoke, her voice steady but cold. She said she had not married poverty. She said love could not feed children. She said she was leaving. Mr. Peter begged. He reminded her of vows spoken under a mango tree, of promises whispered in the dark. Linda stood, tied her wrapper, and lifted a small bag. She did not look back when she walked out, leaving 2 babies and a broken man behind. The door closed softly, but the sound echoed for years. That night, Mr. Peter cried quietly so the twins would not wake. By morning, grief hardened into resolve. He looked at Mary and Naomi, their tiny fists clenched like they were already fighting the world, and he made a vow. If their mother had chosen absence, he would choose presence. If the world offered cruelty, he would offer consistency. He would be the best father he could be, even if it killed him. Work was scarce for a man with no connections and no money. After days of rejection, he borrowed an old wheelbarrow from a neighbor and began working as a porter in the market. He tied the twins to his chest with a faded cloth, their heads peeking out as curious shoppers stared, whispered, and sometimes laughed. Some called him foolish. Others called him irresponsible. A few shook their heads like they were watching a slow tragedy. The wheelbarrow became his office, his desk, his destiny. He carried sacks of rice, baskets of tomatoes, furniture too heavy for pride. Sweat soaked his shirt, and dust coated his skin. At night, his arms trembled from exhaustion, but his heart stayed awake. He sang to the twins while he walked, off-key lullabies mixed with jokes only he found funny. When Mary cried, he bounced gently. When Naomi laughed, he laughed louder. Money came in small coins, just enough for milk and Gary. Some days, he ate nothing. On those days, he told the twins he had already eaten at the market, patting his stomach with a smile. Hunger sharpened his cheekbones, but it could not sharpen his bitterness. He refused to curse Linda's name aloud. He refused to let anger poison his love. Judgment, however, did not refuse him. Women at the market whispered that no real man carried babies like that. Men joked that he had become both father and mother, as if nurturing was a weakness. Mr. Peter heard them all. Sometimes the words pierced him, especially when the babies fell sick and he had no money for medicine. On those nights, fear wrapped around him tighter than the cloth holding the twins. Help arrived quietly, wearing slippers and a kind smile. Mama Caro lived 2 houses away, a widow with silver hair and a voice that carried both humor and authority. She had watched Mr. Peter pass every morning, wheelbarrow creaking, babies bobbing. One afternoon, she stopped him and clicked her tongue. She said the children were too small to be outside all day. She said men were stubborn creatures. Then she took Mary from his chest like it was the most natural thing in the world. From that day, Mama Caro became a pillar. She watched the twins when the sun grew harsh, cooked extra soup, and scolded Mr. Peter for skipping meals. She teased him, calling him Madam Peter whenever he braided the girl's hair too tightly. Her laughter softened the house. Her presence reminded him that family could be chosen. Time, relentless and generous, began to move. The twins grew from fragile bundles into curious toddlers who chased chickens and clapped at passing buses. Mr. Peter taught them letters using charcoal and cardboard. Mama Caro taught them songs and proverbs. When school age came, uniforms were bought in installments, shoes patched more than once. Mr. Peter attended every school meeting, standing at the back, hands rough, heart proud. Mary and Naomi shone. Teachers noticed their sharp questions, their neat handwriting, their hunger to learn. Mr. Peter listened as praise piled up, each word a small repayment for sleepless nights. He pushed his wheelbarrow harder, took on extra loads, ignored the pain in his back. When he collapsed one evening, Mama Caro forced him to rest, muttering that even donkeys stopped sometimes. Despite the struggles, joy found cracks to enter. There were evenings of laughter when power went out and stories replaced television. There were birthdays marked with small cakes and big hugs. There were jokes about the wheelbarrow being the family car. Mr. Peter learned to laugh at himself, because laughter was cheaper than sorrow and twice as nourishing. Still, the absence lingered. Linda's name was a shadow no one spoke aloud. On nights when rain drummed heavily, Mr. Peter wondered where she was, if she ever thought of the girls. He folded the thoughts away like old letters. His focus stayed forward. By the time Mary and Naomi entered secondary school, the wheelbarrow was older, patched with wire and hope. Mr. Peter's hair had begun to gray. The girls walked with confidence, heads high, aware of their unusual story but unashamed. They called their father hero, sometimes jokingly, sometimes with tears in their eyes. Mr. Peter did not know what the future held. He only knew that each morning, he would rise, tie the cloth if needed, grip the wheelbarrow, and choose love again. In a world quick to abandon, he stayed. And in that staying, something powerful was quietly being built. By the time Mary and Naomi wore their final secondary school uniforms, Mr. Peter's wheelbarrow had become more than a tool, it was a witness to time, patched and groaning, much like the man who pushed it. His back curved slightly now, not from age alone but from years of lifting other people's burdens while carrying his own quietly. The twins grew into young women with identical smiles and different strengths. Mary was analytical, the type who broke problems apart like puzzle pieces, while Naomi carried warmth in her voice, calming arguments before they could begin. Teachers often joked that if one did not understand the lesson, the other would explain it better. Their report cards came home glowing, and Mr. Peter would sit on the edge of his bed, squinting at grades like they were treasure maps. When the acceptance letters arrived, they arrived together, as if the universe understood symmetry. Both girls had been admitted to study medicine at reputable universities. The news spread quickly through the neighborhood. People who once mocked Mr. Peter's wheelbarrow now shook his hand with admiration. Mama Caro ululated so loudly that neighbors rushed over, thinking someone had won the lottery. That night, the house overflowed with pride and fear in equal measure. Mr. Peter smiled until his cheeks hurt, then stepped outside when no one was looking. He sat on a low stool, staring at the dark sky, calculating numbers that refused to make sense. Tuition fees loomed like mountains. Acceptance was free. Education was not. The next weeks were a blur of effort. Mr. Peter visited wealthy neighbors, some who had never greeted him before, others who knew him only as the man who blocked the road with his wheelbarrow. He spoke carefully, humbly, offering to work as a houseboy, a driver, anything. He promised loyalty, long hours, silence. Doors closed politely. Some offered sympathy without solutions. Others barely listened. One man laughed and said education was not for poor people's children. Another suggested one girl should go and the other stay behind. Mr. Peter thanked them all, swallowing humiliation like bitter medicine. At night, his chest ached more from rejection than from labor. Mary and Naomi noticed the strain before he spoke. They saw the way he lingered at the door after returning from visits, the way he avoided their eyes when fees were mentioned. One evening, they sat him down and held his hands. Naomi spoke first, her voice gentle. She said dreams delayed were not dreams denied. Mary nodded, adding that medicine would still be there next year. They had already decided. They would defer their admission. Mr. Peter protested, his voice breaking. He said he would find a way. He said he could sell the wheelbarrow, though everyone knew it was worth more in sentiment than money. The twins refused. They reminded him of everything he had given them. They said it was their turn to help. The decision cut deeply, but it also planted something new, partnership. The twins found work as waitresses at a modest roadside restaurant. The hours were long, the pay small, but they worked with the same discipline they had applied to school. They learned to smile through rude customers, to balance trays, to count change quickly. At night, they studied business ideas instead of anatomy books. Mr. Peter watched them leave each morning in uniforms not meant for doctors, and his heart twisted. Yet pride still found space to grow. He returned to his wheelbarrow with renewed purpose, pushing harder, earning a little more, saving every coin. Mama Caro scolded them all for exhaustion, but she also smiled, seeing the family move like a single unit. Months passed. Savings grew slowly, then steadily. One day, Mary suggested they open a small food stall of their own. Naomi laughed, saying she was tired of serving other people's dreams. They pooled their savings, added a small loan from Mama Caro, and rented a tiny space. The menu was simple. The cooking was excellent. The twins worked relentlessly. Mr. Peter helped when he could, washing plates, fixing stools, telling customers jokes about his former career as a professional wheelbarrow driver. Business improved. Regulars came. Word spread. The stall became a restaurant, small but respected. Then came the day that tested their character. After closing one evening, Naomi noticed a briefcase under a table. Inside was more money than they had ever seen and documents stamped with official seals. Panic fluttered, followed by temptation. Mary closed the case and said they had to return it. They traced the owner through the document and arrived at a grand house that made their restaurant look like a toy. The man who answered was Prince Tony, a wealthy businessman with tired eyes. When he saw the briefcase, relief washed over his face. He asked why they returned it. Mary answered simply that it was not theirs. Prince Tony studied them for a long moment, then smiled. Days later, he visited their restaurant. Weeks later, he called them into his office. As a reward for their honesty, he gifted them a building to expand their business. The twins cried openly. Mr. Peter held his head and whispered thanks to a God who seemed to finally be smiling back. Success followed effort like a faithful shadow. The restaurant flourished. They hired staff. They opened more branches. Mr. Peter retired from the wheelbarrow, his hands finally resting. They bought him a comfortable chair and insisted he use it. Mama Caro moved into a better house, her laughter louder than ever. Just when life seemed settled, a woman walked into the restaurant asking for work. Her name was Linda. Linda stood at the entrance of the restaurant with her shoulders squared and her eyes lowered, as if humility were a borrowed garment she was still learning to wear. Years had thinned her face and dulled the sharp confidence she once carried out the door, but Mr. Peter recognized her immediately. Time had changed many things, but memory had not lost its teeth. Mary was the first to respond. She asked Linda about her experience, her availability, her name. Linda answered carefully, choosing words like stones to cross a river. Naomi watched quietly, her expression polite but distant. When Linda said she could wash dishes, clean floors, and start immediately, Mary nodded and told her to come back the next morning. Mr. Peter did not speak until Linda left. His chest tightened as though an old rope had been pulled again. Naomi noticed and placed a hand on his arm. She asked if he was okay. He said he was just tired. The lie passed between them gently, but it did not settle. The next day, Linda arrived early. She tied an apron and walked silently, scrubbing plates with a focus that suggested repentance or fear. Staff whispered, curious about the woman who looked familiar yet unnamed. Mr. Peter stayed away from the restaurant that day, choosing instead to walk slowly through the neighborhood, leaning on a stick he refused to admit he needed. By evening, avoidance failed him. He returned to the restaurant to find Linda carrying a bucket of water. Their eyes met. For a second, the room stilled. Linda's hands trembled, and the bucket sloshed. She whispered his name like a question she already knew the answer to. Mr. Peter did not shout. He did not cry. He simply stared, taking in the woman who had left him with 2 infants and a silence that lasted decades. Linda began to speak, apologies tumbling over each other, explanations one thing by time. Mr. Peter raised a hand, not in anger, but in exhaustion. He asked her to finish her work and leave for the day. That night, the twins listened as their father finally told the full story without pauses or protection. They sat close, absorbing the weight of betrayal and endurance. When he finished, Mary said forgiveness did not mean forgetting. Naomi added that healing sometimes needed boundaries. They agreed Linda could continue working, but they would watch closely. For a while, Linda behaved. She arrived on time, worked hard, avoided conflict. Customers liked her politeness. Mr. Peter avoided her path, but the knot in his chest loosened slightly. He saw the twins struggle with mixed emotions, torn between curiosity and caution. Family, he realized, was really simple. As the restaurant expanded further, pressures grew. Linda began to complain quietly, then openly. She argued with staff, undermined supervisors, and once hinted to customers that she was more important than her role suggested. Mary warned her gently. Naomi spoke firmly. Linda nodded but changed little. One afternoon, an argument erupted in the kitchen. A tray crashed. Voices rose. Mr. Peter arrived to find Linda shouting, old pride flaring like a spark near dry grass. In that moment, the past and present collided. Mr. Peter felt anger surge, sharp and overdue. He asked Linda to remove her apron and leave. Linda cried, accusing fate, poverty, everyone but herself. The twins stood their ground. They paid her wages and added a small envelope of money. Mary explained that opportunity thrived where humility lived. Naomi said they wished her well. Days later, the twins visited Linda's small rented room. They found her sitting quietly, older than before, smaller somehow. They spoke softly. They told her they could not change the past, but they could shape what came next. They offered her a small shop to manage, modest but stable. Linda wept, gratitude mixing with regret. Life moved forward again. The restaurants multiplied. Mr. Peter finally allowed himself rest. He spent mornings reading newspapers he barely understood and afternoons telling exaggerated stories to grandchildren of neighbors. Mama Caro visited often, demanding better tea and more laughter. Mary and Naomi faced their own crossroads. Letters from universities arrived again, inviting them to resume their medical studies. They sat together late one night, the restaurant quiet around them. They talked about dreams and realities, about fulfillment and choice. Medicine was noble, but so was what they had built. They realized success had many uniforms. They chose the restaurant business, not as surrender, but as alignment. They invested further, trained staff, created scholarships for other children. Mr. Peter watched them with awe, seeing not what they had given up, but what they had become. Love, unexpected and gentle, found him too. Ruth, a manager at one of the branches, shared his humor and his patience. She listened more than she spoke, and when she smiled, his ears felt lighter. The twins noticed the change and conspired quietly. The day they suggested marriage, Mr. Peter laughed until tears came. He said he was too old. Naomi said happiness did not check birth certificates. Mary said the heart deserved company. Preparations unfolded like a well-kept secret. Then surprises stacked upon surprises. Mary had fallen in love with a supplier who admired her mind. Naomi had found partnership with a chef who respected her fire. Dates aligned. Joy multiplied. On a bright morning, the family gathered. 3 weddings. 1 father. 2 daughters. Mama Caro in her finest wrapper. Linda watching from a distance, proud and subdued. Mr. Peter stood tall, no wheelbarrow in sight, his hands steady, his heart full. The road that began in dust and tears had led here, paved by honesty, patience, and grace. The wedding morning arrived with the kind of sunlight that felt intentional, as though the sky itself had agreed to witness a conclusion long overdue. Mr. Peter stood before a mirror borrowed from a neighbor, adjusting his suit with hands that once shook from hunger but now trembled only with joy. The reflection staring back at him looked older, yes, but it also looked complete. Outside, chairs were being arranged. Flowers borrowed color from nearby gardens. Mama Caro moved around like a general, shouting instructions while laughing at her own seriousness. She had already declared herself the unofficial grandmother of the occasion and dared anyone to challenge her authority. Mary and Naomi prepared in separate rooms, their laughter drifting through the compound like music. They teased each other about childhood memories, about the days they shared one pair of shoes, about how their father used to braid their hair too tight and insist it was fashionable. Nostalgia sat with them gently, not as regret, but as gratitude. Mr. Peter's thoughts wandered, uninvited but welcome. He remembered the weight of the twins against his chest, the squeak of the wheelbarrow, the way the world once looked at him with pity or judgment. He remembered nights of fear, mornings of resolve. None of it felt wasted now. Pain, he realized, did not disappear. It transformed. Ruth approached him quietly, her smile calm, grounding. She adjusted his collar and joked that he looked richer than some of the men who once rejected him. Mr. Peter laughed, a full-bodied laugh that startled even him. With her, he felt seen without explanation. Guests filled the space. Neighbors, staff, business partners, and friends who had become family gathered under the open sky. Some whispered about how far the family had come. Others simply smiled, absorbing the joy like warmth. Linda arrived late, standing at the back. She wore a simple dress and carried herself carefully. No one announced her. No one pushed her away. She watched as her daughters walked toward their futures, eyes shining. Tears slipped down her cheeks, unchecked. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel both pride and responsibility without defense. The ceremonies unfolded one after another, woven together by laughter and shared history. Mr. Peter spoke his vow slowly, deliberately, promising companionship instead of rescue, partnership instead of sacrifice. Ruth responded with equal grace. When Mary and Naomi exchanged vows, their voices did not shake. They had learned early how to stand firm. Applause rose like a wave. Music followed. Plates clattered. Joy settled into the bones of everyone present. Later, as evening softened the edges of the day, Mr. Peter found Linda sitting alone under a tree. Silence passed between them, not hostile, just honest. Finally, he spoke. He said forgiveness had been a journey, not a moment. He said he had carried anger for years because it was lighter than grief. Linda nodded, accepting what was offered without demanding more. They did not embrace. They did not rewrite history. They acknowledged it and let it rest. As night deepened, Mr. Peter sat surrounded by laughter, his daughters glowing with confidence, his wife by his side. Mama Caro slept lightly in a chair, snoring unapologetically. He smiled at the scene, knowing not every story ended this way, but grateful is hard. The wheelbarrow, now rusted, leaned against a wall nearby. Someone had decorated it with ribbons earlier as a joke. Mr. Peter looked at it and felt no shame. Only respect. It had carried more than loads. It had carried hope. Life, he knew, would continue to test them. Businesses would face challenges. Love would require work. Forgiveness would need renewal. But the foundation was strong, built on honesty, effort, and family chosen and kept. As the final song played and guests slowly departed, Mr. Peter whispered a quiet thank you to the night. Not for wealth, not for recognition, but for endurance. For the courage to stay when living seemed easier. For the grace to forgive when bitterness offered comfort. The poor man with a wheelbarrow was poor no longer, not in the ways that mattered. Sometimes, life strips everything away to reveal what truly lasts. Perseverance may look ordinary, honesty may seem unrewarded, and forgiveness may feel unfair, but each carries a quiet power that shapes destinies. Mr. Peter's journey reminds us that staying, loving, and choosing integrity, even when unseen, can build futures greater than any dream once imagined. Family is not only who stays, but who grows, who learns, and who chooses grace again and again. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and tell us what you learned in the comments below.